Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. First thing we need, Dr. Wu, is your name with the spelling and how you'd like to be titled, like kind of a short.
Oh, okay, sure. Mark Wu, M-A-R-K-W-U, and then title would be Professor of Neurology.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're the sleep guy.
I am a sleep guy. I don't know if the sleep guy. But yeah, I do research on sleep. I see patients with sleep disorders, and I love sleep.
Yeah. How important is sleep? I know that's a very broad question, but in a nutshell.
You know, sleep is something that often in modern society we kind of underplay or don't take as seriously, but it really is important. And it's important at multiple levels. So sleep is important for the brain. You know, not only is it important for things like learning and memory and things like synaptic plasticity, which we can talk in more detail about, but it's also important for things like clearing waste from your brain. And in addition to the brain, sleep is also important for your body. Lots of studies have shown that healthy metabolism depends upon good sleep.
So what happens when you sleep? I know that's very complicated. A lot happens. Right?
Yes, actually a lot happens in the brain. A lot of people think that when you sleep, everything just sort of shuts off. But actually, that's not true. When we drift off into sleep, there's different stages of sleep. There's light sleep, and then there's deeper sleep, where your brain actually undergoes these global slow waves. So just imagine the hundreds of billions of neurons in your brain undergoing these slow waves, big waves. And then there's another stage of sleep that we also undergo called REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. And this form of sleep is the form of sleep when our brains actually look like they're awake. When you measure the brain waves, they look like they're awake, and our eyes are moving. If you've ever watched anyone sleeping and you sometimes see their eyes bouncing back and forth, they're in rapid eye movement or REM sleep. And that's also the period of sleep when we're dreaming, vivid dreams, like in a movie. And our bodies are paralyzed, actually. Our muscles are really low in tone. Yeah, so those are the sort of things that happen during sleep.
And how many cycles? 6?
So, the number of cycles are variable, but I would say that there are probably several cycles. And usually what happens is when you drift off into sleep, you start from wakefulness to light sleep, then deeper sleep, and then you come into REM. And that's kind of and then it repeats itself. But one thing that's a little bit interesting is that the first third of your night is mostly comprised of slow wave or deep sleep. And the last third of your night has more of the REM sleep, which is why sometimes you might find that early in the morning you tend to remember your dreams better.
Mm-hmm. And everybody does dream. Some people think, I don't, but they just don't remember them.
That's exactly right, yeah. So people often say, oh, I never dream, or other people always come to me in clinic and say, I dream so much. The reality is that everyone dreams during REM sleep. And if we were to take you into the lab and then we poked you awake when you were in REM sleep, you would be able to tell us what the dream you were having was.
Does every creature on Earth sleep?
As far as we know, it's amazing to think about that. But in fact, every animal that's ever been studied appears to sleep. And that really emphasizes the important function of sleep, because from an evolutionary standpoint, sleep is a period of activity where you can't defend yourself, you can't eat, but yet every animal sleeps, ranging from your cat, your dog at home, but even tiny little fruit flies that we study in our lab, they also sleep. So what is it for? Scientists are still trying to figure that out, but clearly it's something important.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the clearing of the waste, which happens during the slow wave. What do you mean by that?
So what studies have shown in humans and in mice is that there are these perivascular channels in the brain. What that means is that you have blood vessels that penetrate your brain, and there's these channels that line these vessels, and these channels are together called the glymphatic system. And what happens is during slow wave sleep, these channels seem to open, and that allows for more cerebrospinal fluid, the fluid that bathes your brain, to wash out the waste that your cells make. And so that is thought to be one function of sleep, which may have important implications for neurological disease, because toxic waste that your brain makes may accumulate if you don't get enough slow wave sleep. And interestingly, and I mentioned these tiny little fruit flies that we study in the lab, even though they don't have a glymphatic system, when they sleep, they also seem to clear waste, because they move their mouth parts, these proboscis, back and forth in a rhythmic manner. And people have shown that it moves the fluid in their body. And so the function of sleep in clearing waste may be conserved throughout the animal kingdom.
What can happen to you if you don't, I mean, this is another broad question. If you don't sleep enough, it can affect you in many ways, correct?
That's right, yeah. So we sort of think about the problems of sleep loss in sort of the acute near term, like overnight effects, and then kind of in the long term. So in the near term, basically, if you pull an all-nighter and you don't sleep, you start to lose what we call attention. That is, you can't maintain awareness and attention as well, and parts of your brain start to not connect as well. So what do I mean by that? So everyone's had this experience where you stayed up all night, and then you have to, let's say, go to class or be in some, meeting or something, and then you start partly drifting asleep, right? You're kind of like drifting, you're kind of like nodding, you're kind of there, but you're sort of slightly falling. And what happens is actually when we measure your brain waves, parts of your brain are actually falling asleep. So your whole brain isn't falling asleep, but parts of your brain are falling asleep. So when you don't have enough sleep, you lose the ability to maintain attention. In addition, what we know is that sleep on the acute phase can have lots of effect for almost every brain condition. For example, if you have migraines, which is very common, a lot of people have migraines, or if you have epilepsy, if you don't sleep, those things all flare. You have more migraines, you have more seizures. And in fact, in the hospital, that's what we do when we're trying to provoke a seizure. To monitor it, we don't let them sleep. On the chronic, so a lot of things happen on the acute level in terms of attention and then sort of different brain disorders. On the chronic level, we think that poor sleep has many effects. One of them is, like we talked about, there's a lot of research that we here are doing at Hopkins and many other places that suggests that if you don't get enough sleep, it's bad for overall brain health, like accumulation of toxic proteins in your brain that may lead to Alzheimer's disease. In addition, we also know that if you don't sleep, you can also affect your body metabolism. And I think a lot of people have heard this before, but it's, scientists have studied this and shown that if you don't sleep enough, you basically change the balance of your hormones such that you promote eating and then you reduce satiety. So people tend to gain weight when they don't sleep as well. In fact, studies have also shown that if you take a human being and you don't let them sleep one night, their bodies cannot process glucose normally, almost as if they're diabetic.
Just one night?
Just one night of complete sleep deprivation can make you have some challenge in processing glucose.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about learning, because that is something that also happens while you're asleep.
That's right. So one of the important, although we don't know what the function of sleep is, a lot of data suggests that one potential function at the cellular level is synaptic plasticity. So we have hundreds of billions of neurons in our brain, and these neurons are very dynamic and changing connections constantly. This process is called plasticity. And what we think is that sleep is important for this plasticity. So for example, if you don't sleep, some of these plastic connections don't form as well. For example, baby animals in all species, whether you're human beings or your dog or even fruit flies, those baby animals sleep a lot. And we think the reason that is because their brains, their neurons are all wiring and making connections. In addition, studies have shown that if you don't sleep well, you don't learn as well the next day, or you don't have good learning and memory. And a lot of studies have, and historically people focused on REM sleep, but nowadays people think that slow wave sleep is really the important part for learning and memory.
So how much sleep should a person get?
That's a great question. So, the sleep societies have basically suggested for the average adult American, 7 hours of sleep a night is good. But I will say that sleep is on a bell curve. There are some people that need 10, 12, 14 hours of sleep, and I have patients like that in my clinic. And there are some people that you may know that only need 5 hours of sleep, and everyone's jealous of them because they're fully rested and they only need 5 hours and they're ready to go. So it's really a bell curve. So what I would say is that the average people should go for is 7, but they should pay attention to how they feel. You may only need 5 or 6, but you might need 10.
How would you know if you really need more? Is it?
Pause you just for a second?
Yeah.
Yeah.